Cheers, everybody. Welcome
Cheers,
back to the
everybody.
Reckoning Brothers podcast. We, last time, Mark beguiled us with a wonderful story about how he started working for Ronald Reagan. And I had never heard it before. I thought it was great. I'll just give you, just Mark, tell me if I'm wrong, but long story short, it was purely sexual. They saw you and they thought, this young man has the mouth that we need. And I think you said, I want tell me I'm paraphrasing a bit, but it was something to the effect of those tonsils could take a throbbing. Is what they told you,
I
correct?
don't know why you hurt me, Scott. I've never done anything to your people. Never.
You've helped them. You've helped them,
My
Marcy.
favorite Ronald Reagan story, and we'll finish the one that I told before how I got to work for him. But my favorite Ronald Reagan story involves the next CIA, the guy who's going to become the CIA director. And I didn't know it at the time. And this is late in the campaign, and the campaign's running out of money. And back then, campaigns didn't have all the money that they've got now. Presidential campaigns were run on literally. If you walked into the compliance office at Reagan for President headquarters, there were like lots of envelopes with $5 bills in them. That's how people contributed to presidential campaigns back then. And a man named William J. Casey, who became CIA director, had been he'd been he's he was in the old OSS, the forerunner to the CIA during World War II. So he was killing Nazis as a spy during the war. So he was kind of a natural choice to be a CIA director. But that had escaped everybody's mind. Like, it wasn't the days of the internet where you could like instantly read somebody's bio. Nobody really knew who Bill Casey was. The most recent memory of him was that he had been President Nixon's Securities and Exchange Commissioner. He was a high-powered lawyer in New York with lots of money connections, and the campaign was broke. And he was a brilliant man, and Reagan taps him to be campaign manager. He fires the campaign manager. He hires Bill Casey as campaign manager, and um, about a week or two after, Reagan and Bill Casey fly in to D.C. on a red-eye flight. I'm in early, as I always was, in the press office like 4 o'clock in the morning. I'd get there like 3:45, 3:30, 3:45 in the morning. So it's like 4:15 in the morning, maybe, at the latest 5 in the morning. And the Governor Reagan, and Bill Casey take the elevator to the fourth floor at Reagan National Headquarters, which had moved from California to right across the river from D.C. And this is a press office. There's tons of newspapers around. There's a myriad copies of the L.A. Times, the New York Times, the Houston Chronicle, the Chicago Trib, the Chicago Sun-Times, the Washington Post, the Washington Times, because it's a press office, so it has all these newspapers. And I'm doing press releases. I'm making the packets that are going to get dropped off at the news bureaus, at the network news bureaus, first thing in the morning. And Bill and Reagan and Casey had stopped at a taco place, an all-night taco place. It wasn't Taco Bell. I don't know what the name was. And for all I know, they could have, gotten it in California and brought it back. So, but they brought back, Mexican food in paper bags. And the governor went into his office and closed the door. And Bill Casey comes into the press office, and I'm walking towards him. He's like, because I'm working in a room, and I'm standing up, and I'm, shuffling press releases around, and he's sitting there reading the New York Times, and he's got the front page of the New York Times, and newspapers, open like this, and they open like this, right? So he's got the New York Times lengthwise in front of him. Bill Casey was a very kind of
Trying to
eccentric.
picture this.
No, he's a very kind of
Been
eccentric
25
man.
years since I've seen a
Yeah, he's a
newspaper.
very eccentric man, and I'll imitate him in a moment. He's reading the New York Times, and Bill Casey could not talk with his mouth. He couldn't talk like normal people. Bill Casey talked like, well, good close, wow.
Sounds like you're doing a Nixon impression. They dressed all like that back
Like
then?
people made jokes at late. You mean later on? People made jokes. Well, I'm sorry how the president knows what he's talking to. Oh, anyone understands Bill Casey. right?
Churchill, Nixon, they all kind of sounded the same like that. Yeah, I get it.
Well, I mean, he was even more. What's the word? I'll think of the word in a minute.
Maybe
Not
eating all the red meat they ate back then or something just did something to the jowls.
eating a taco, and since he can't, yeah, since he couldn't eat a taco like a normal person, it was all the filling in the taco was falling on the front page of the New York Times, like all over it.
They
He's
got what they deserved.
biting a taco and he's chewing like and it's dripping all over the place. And I was about ready to laugh. I was about ready to guffaw at this man who I'd only seen two or three times. And as I'm watching him do it, and the governor, unbeknownst to me, has opened his door and is walking up behind me, and I'm about ready to go like this. I'm like this, about ready to laugh, and the governor puts his hand on me, and he like gets my attention, and he goes, "Oh my," telling me not to laugh at Bill Casey. Right now, what I didn't know was Bill Casey was going to be the next CIA director. And so fast forward like a month or two, and I'm over in the West Wing, and Bill Casey has just left the meeting, and he's walking out, and I'm like, "Good morning, Mr. Casey. Good morning." You know, and Ronald Reagan walks out of the rose garden, and he looks at me, and he sees me say, "Good morning, Mr. Casey." He goes, and the president goes, "Remember when I saved you from being killed by Bill Casey, the CIA director?" Like, "Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. You saved me from me." He goes, "Or otherwise you might be whacked." I'm like, "Thanks."
Man,
Remember when you were going to laugh at Bill Casey and you'd be dead? It's great.
you,
Great.
you got to watch out, man.
I
You
know. Got to watch out for that.
you got chewed out by your boss, Lynn Notzinger.
I got chewed
You
out by
almost
my
got
boss. And
killed by
so
the
I've got to,
CIA.
yeah, I've got to drive it. So I get the job. He calls me. I accept this position as a press
I
assistant.
should just Mark. Want to let you know where you left off was Lynn calls you into the office after berating you and
Screams at me,
taught you
teaches me how to
how
write.
to be a proper
and
writer.
and
That's what
and
we left
and,
off.
and it was weeks, or it was months later before I realized that Lynn was had two daughters. He really wasn't a daughter dad. He was you know a gruff, gin swilling, barrel chested man's man, and I think he always wanted a son. That was very lucky for me because I happened to be at the right place at the right time. So I load
You
up
got
my
the
Toyota.
mouth, that soft
Oh
mouth.
yeah, the phone call happens. My dad. I tell my dad I'm going to go to California and work for Ronald Reagan. Nobody can believe it. I can't believe it. He maps out my route. It's Thursday afternoon. I've I've got to leave like by 11 o'clock on Thursday night to get to California by Monday morning for my appointment with the governor. And um, and
Mhm.
back then, Jimmy Carter had signed an executive order. He made a national speed limit because of the energy crisis and the recession. He he made a national 55 mile an hour speed limit. No state could have a speed limit higher than 55. That was the fastest you could go. And so I'm driving through Missouri. I'm driving through, I'm leaving from Ohio. I get to New Mexico. Well, there's nobody in the great expanses of the West driving 55 miles an hour.
Hmm.
Crossing Oklahoma, nobody's driving. Everybody's driving 75, 80, 85, 90. I get to Arizona, and Arizona is just like this huge, expansive, like deserted road, right? And they've got these gigantic rocks in Arizona. I
I've
don't know
been
if
there.
you,
It's beautiful. It's
it's
beautiful. Arizona's
these
one of those
rocks,
beautiful
these
states. There.
gigantic fucking rocks, right? They're huge, right? They're 25-story buildings, and they're gigantic. Um, and I wanted to see how fast my Toyota SR5 would go. People were passing me. I was doing like 95 miles an hour. People were passing me. I'm like, well, let's just see how fast this little Toyota SR5 will go. And I probably had this much room left on the pedal. So whatever was left, I pressed down. I got up to like 102, 103 miles an hour,
Mm.
and I'm flying by this gigantic rock with a constable hiding behind it in a in a Ford Galaxy, and back then Ford Galaxy police cars had 502 cubic inch engines. These things could do like 150 miles an hour without breaking a sweat.
I'm just still floored by the fact that you called a cop a constable.
That's because what they called them then. In Arizona back in those days,
Is this 1875 when you had your horse and buggy chase?
contrary to popular belief, I was not born in 1875, nor
Okay.
did I exist then. But you're close.
Okay. So the constable.
No, well, so yeah,
Okay.
in Arizona in those days, and probably in some counties still, to this day in Arizona, they don't have judges and sheriffs; they have constables and magistrates. And this constable, pulls me. I can't remember what county I was in. Pulls me over. Well, I'm doing over 100 miles an hour, so it's reckless hop. So I've got to be held. He's telling me I have to spend the night in jail. This is Sunday afternoon. Like, I'm on time. I haven't slept since I left on Thursday at 11 p.m. because the colonel's instructions were drive straight through. If you don't have any breakdowns and you don't stop to eat any place and you piss in a cup, you'll be lucky to roll into Southern California about 5 or 6 o'clock on Sunday night, get a decent night's sleep for your meeting with Lynn Nofziger and the governor. So this cop is telling me that because boy, you're doing over 100 miles an hour, so you got to spend the night in jail. You got to go see the magistrate first thing, and you got to go see the magistrate Monday morning.
Mm.
And I'm like, sir, this is my dream job, right? Like, what am I going to? This is 1979. You can't like get out of something like that with a phone call. Back then, I didn't know, and like the last thing in the world I wanted to do was like call, hey, like with my one phone call, call my dad, see if he could fly out, right, to Arizona, somehow get me out of jail on Sunday night and get me to California first thing Monday morning. So, but I was a smart kid and wiser beyond my years. Thank goodness, because my dad was a fighter pilot, and so he said. So I said, I can't spend the night in jail. I've got a meeting with Governor Reagan first thing Monday morning. It's my dream job. I can't. You're going to ruin my life. And so this constable, he's like had like a 10-gallon hat on and like a 6-shooter. He was like a John Wayne kind of guy, quintessential, straight out of Central Casting. Immediately skeptical, and he goes, "Yeah, sure you do." And Reagan was very popular in Arizona because of his support for Barry Goldwater in the '64 election. So everybody in Arizona loved Ronald Reagan. And this guy's like, "Yeah, sure, you got a meeting with Governor Reagan tomorrow." And I had that. Remember the story? Remember I told you that Lynn Nofziger sent a telex to my dad's
Yeah,
office?
you had
I
the
had that
famous
telex.
GPS
I
receipt.
had that telex, which was by now almost all the way faded because it was on the thermal paper. So I reached in the glove compartment. I said, "Let me show you." Got that out of the glove compartment, showed it to this cop, who looks at it and goes, "By God, you do got an appointment with Governor Reagan tomorrow morning, don't you?" I said, "Yes, sir." I said, "Do you have any idea how much my fine would be? Would you pay it for me?" I was smart enough to know not to go, "Hey, magistrate or constable, how much do you want to forget about all this?"
Mm.
I bribed the fucking constable. I bribed him. But I asked it in the right way. "Do you have any idea how much my fine would be, sir? Would you pay it for me?" And he takes off his hat and he scratches his head and he goes, "Right around $150.
Mm.
I had $500 on me. It's all the money I had in the world. I knew that was back then. You'll never believe it, Scott, since you live in California now. Back then, $500 was what you might take to California to like exist for a month until you got a paycheck. You can believe that, which would get
Oh,
you
yeah.
what? Get you by for like a day and a half in California in a hotel room now.
Yeah,
So
maybe.
I peeled off $150 and was on my way to California.
That is a great story, Mark. The only problem I have with it is you kept talking, or you at least mentioned what a smart young man you were, and
Yeah,
you decided to go 105 miles per hour in
in
your
a,
SR5 to
with
see
a
how fast it would
with a
go.
natural
I'm just gonna Maybe I'm splitting hairs,
with
but
the national
maybe
speed.
not the smartest young man move.
I was doing 50 miles over the speed limit. I was breaking the national goddamn law.
When your dream job was waiting for you,
I
though,
know,
silly mistake.
right?
You
I
lucked
mean,
out. You lucked out. And
yeah,
we're
I
all
really.
better for it
Oh,
that you did. But
it was, and I tell
did
that
you
story.
tell your father that story? Because he would have probably beat the shit out of you.
Yeah,
Rightfully so.
I waited a while to tell Dad that story.
But he
I
does. He
probably waited. I probably waited until after inauguration day to tell him that story. And during the
Heard
campaign,
you say I waited 20 years to tell him that story.
my mom and dad would kept telling me that because I was like, if we win the election, I'm going to go to the White House. Because by now I'm, fast forward a year and whatever on the campaign trail in Reagan National Headquarters, and now I'm Lynn Nopsinger's fair-haired boy, and everybody likes Mark, and I've worked very hard, 16, 17 hours a day, got no sleep, etc. So,
That's what your
I
20s are for.
huh? Oh
That's
fuck
what your 20s are for.
for no money because you didn't make any money on campaigns back in those days. My salary back, everybody's salary back then, unless you were like up here, like everybody made $750 a month. Like you didn't make shit. Which, believe it or not, Scott, you could live on in California back then. I did.
I don't believe it. You got to make like 10 grand a month to even exist out here right now.
It's crazy. So, yeah, yeah, thanks to not having sound money anymore.
Let's
Yes.
start chime in. I'm going to start chiming in here. We're going to need to start wrapping on this one. Maybe we go to a part three.
Sure. Yeah. No, I just want to say, as Mark's face is frozen in the screen right now. Do you see that, Josh? It
I
looks
broke him.
very,
I
I don't know,
broke
it's
him.
Picasso. It's kind of beautiful. I hope that everybody can see it. His face is frozen right now in like a reddish hue, and after it's so appropriate after that story.
Yeah.
And I'm loving hearing this. I mean, Josh, maybe you heard these stories before. I haven't. Mark and I
I,
have been friends for years.
oh, we lost him completely.
Yeah.
I have heard a couple of these stories, but not thoroughly. Like it is entertaining to me.
Yeah.
All right,
And
I'm gonna
also,
go ahead and
I should say, cop stands for constable on patrol, so we still use the phrase constable.
oh,
I just,
okay.
meh, meh,
So I'm gonna go ahead and wrap on
that's
this
about it.
one, and we can pick up part three.
Sounds good.